This is the Dover Download Podcast. My name is Christopher Parker, and for the past 25 years, I've had the pleasure of working with, learning from, and talking to a variety of volunteer, staff, and community members. This podcast explores conversations, activities, and a variety of policies and programs which exist here in Dover to improve the community in one way or another. There's an old adage that the only things guaranteed in life are death and taxes, and I think that while those two may be true, maybe we should also add the conundrum of what to do with solid waste. And today we're going to learn the history of Dover solid waste and how we've dealt with it, but we're also going to look forward to what we might be seeing as a change in the way that our collections are done and how we might move forward with our new contract with waste management. Dave Dinsey of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee and Bill Stafford, a man about town, who just knows a lot about solid waste, is joining us to chat about these options. Gentlemen, good to have you here.
Glad to be here. Yes. Thank you.
So we'll start with a little background, and then we'll move into where we go from there. And I know this is sort of on a timeliness standpoint from the original airing of this podcast will be after you've presented to the City Council, who ultimately will make a decision, presumably around January 15th. And we'll go from there. So, Dave, why don't you tell the listener a little bit about SWAC and about what we're doing here?
Okay, the Solid Waste Advisory Committee is an advisory group to city management and the city council. We meet every second Thursday of every month at 6 p.m. at the Community Services Building over by the Recycling Center. There's a citizens forum every meeting, too, where you can voice your concerns or speak up and let us know what you think.
Dave, how long have you been on the SWAC?
A long time. That's about what we've done a very long time, yes. So, and there are some openings too for folks if they are interested in joining.
So we say we're a bag and tag community. What does that mean?
Okay, so this give you a little talk about past, present, future. Back in 35 years ago-ish, late 80s, a volunteer group established a recycling center, worked with the city to establish a recycling center. And at that time, everything was landfilled. I mean, the contract was for like 23,000 tons to go in that landfill. And today we're doing 4,600 tons. So you can see the difference there. And it was a lot of money back then. So we moved on from the recycling center to establish a bag and tag system. And what that means is a special revenue fund was set up based to take on the revenues from the bag and tag sales, and that would pay for collection and disposal to go into the landfill. All the recycling, collection, disposal, and recycling center remained in the property base. So that's, your property taxes would pay for that. And the principle is allowed the homeowners to regulate their costs at the curb for their trash and maximize their use of recycling. And at that time, Dover was a nationally recognized program. So that bag and tag program, 35 years later, is what we use today, and probably at least for the next 2 years anyway. Times have changed. It's a very labor-intensive process, probably not the dream job for most people to jump out of that truck in the cold and the heat, pitch those bags, and empty those recycling bins. And in addition to that, the number of vendors who are capable of providing the service to Dover, the size of Dover, has dwindled quite a bit. So the competition has dwindled. And landfill and incinerator space in New England is at or near capacity. So costs are rising, they'll continue to rise. And finally, like all other industries, that industry is going to automation. It's not a matter of if, but when.
Just looking at things from a chronological standpoint, in early 2023, the City Council, with the support of the SWAC committee, set aside some monies to hire an outside consultant to come in and take a look at Dover's current process, to, soup to nuts, and then also advise us on, where could we go from there? Could we do it inside? Could the city take it over? Do we continue with a contractor, et cetera, et cetera? So that was early in 23. In January of 24, there was a final study given by this consulting agency to the council. And the outcome of that was that our city manager asked the SWAC committee to address three items that came out of that report. Number one was, tell us do we really want to go from bag to tag to toters for both trash and the recycles? How do we collect the revenue on that? Today it's through the bag selling system. In the future, probably utility billing. And the third thing was, who's going to do it? Because what we were thinking is that the town, if we took this over, we'd have more quality control, more accountability for the process. But as Dave and myself and the third member, Doug, got into this in the ad hoc committee, we realized that, there were a lot of things that the consultants did a good job, but there were some things that they could have gone into deeper, like some of the cost for the equipment was a little bit lowballed. They showed that there was going to be maybe $150,000 savings annually. But the heck of it was when we started looking at infrastructure and lost time accidents and, just trying to hire people for that, it became kind of an insurmountable thing. And we said, you know what? We're not in the business. We're not experts at this. Well, let's go with the contract. So that gets us to today, where during our ad hoc committee process, looking at all those items, we actually received a proposed contract extension from Waste Management. And what that was we'll give you an extension for 2 years, which gets us out to 2027. And then at that point in time, we're giving you a new contract, and that new contract would be using automated equipment and transitioning the city over, just all the logistics involved in getting those barrels out there. So at any rate, Dave has delivered a pretty significant report in October. Mr. Joyle asked us to go back and take a look at utility billing. We did. Dave's given him that report. Waste Management, even though our contract isn't up until June, Waste Management has to giddy up to get the equipment to get us online 2 years into the future. So
the idea is there'd be a 2-year extension of our existing bag and tag program,
right,
which would allow us to transition to whatever the automation style is. So Dave, what are the general aspects of the contract negotiations that we've had with Waste Management?
The general aspects of the contract extension proposal that Waste Management has put forth are, they offer 2 options to us. First option is they will collect our solid waste and recycling at the curb with bag and tag, as we do today, after which they will be done and we can go out to bid. The issue with the bid process is bidders becoming less and less available, especially for the city size of Dover. We think there will probably be maybe 2 contractors to bid on that. I think they bid last time they bid 5 years ago. I think we had 2 or 3 bid, and only one of them bid on the disposal aspect. So there's constraints there. The second proposal they offered was, okay, we'll do it for 2 years. We'll do manual collection, bag and tag like we do now, after which we'll start an automated collection with toters throughout the city. As within industry, they're going to automation, and they'll do that for 5 years. And the city will own those toters after 10 years. So those are the aspects of the what's coming up here and what they're offering. And they will relay some of those cost savings to us when they start the automated collection, because it's process improvements by automation. So they'll relay some of that and give us some discount at that time.
So Bill, when Dave talks about toters, he means those larger, taller collection bins that have wheels, flap usually.
Right.
My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is I would essentially have 2 of those assigned to me. One that is recycling and one that is solid waste. And there would be some sort of serial number or some sort of identifier so that you can't steal mine, I can't steal yours. And I assume it's really assigned to the property, not to the owner. So that when I sell my house, I'm selling that as part of the package.
Yeah, I think that's what we came up with in the ad hoc committee. We're talking about a standard model would be a 64-gallon.
Okay.
They're plastic. They have wheels, as you mentioned. I think from my standpoint, from a town standpoint, going to these containers is important because they have lids on them. The whole reason I got involved in the solid waste committee was I just couldn't stand seeing the recycled materials being overloaded in our current recycle bins, blowing down Washington Street when there was a 10 or 15 knot wind. And, I've only lived here for 10 years, but when I first got here, I thought, well, geez, it's a little bit, the town's not very picked up. But then I realized this refuse is coming from our recycle.
So, Dave, Bill just mentioned the toters are 64 gallon. What does that, from a relationship standpoint, or what's the current recycling bin? Do you know about how that compares?
9. I think it's about, I want to say it was 22 gallons.
Okay.
Could be a little off on that.
So they're about 3 times the size.
It's about 3 times the size.
And so I'll only have to put out a recycling bin every 3 weeks.
You could, but you can't leave that cardboard on the side of the curb. It's got to be in the bin. So in a home delivery world, you're going to need that 64, in my opinion.
So that's what I was leading you towards. Can you explain that? Because that's, I think, a pretty big change.
Okay, so what would happen with the bins is that you'd have one for recycling, one for trash. They'd each have a unique serial number, and that'd be signed to the property owner. And what we've recommended is that we continue with a user fee called a utility bill. You get a utility bill now for your water and sewer. We'll just add trash onto that, so you get a water, sewer, and trash bill, and you'll be charged quarterly for that. From a process standpoint, when you roll your toters out to the curb, they would have to be closed. You'd have to be able to fit whatever you have inside there. If they're overstuffed, they won't pick them up. They will take a picture of it, send it to the city saying we didn't pick it up because it was overstuffed.
Didn't meet the criteria.
Didn't meet the criteria. We're looking to keep those toters and the curbside looking good and being efficient as far as collection and disposal.
So along that lines, do I understand from the workshop that there's a fee for the truck to come by my house, and then there's a fee for the amount I put out, the quantity, or is there just one fee?
This is a flat rate system, unlike bag and tag, which you have some control over how much you spend. This will be a flat rate system. We've looked at some of the numbers. We constructed some models of the budget. We presented that at the workshop. And from there, it's a math problem as to how many folks are going to participate.
Right.
And divide that over that number. And we think we've made that affordable. So we're competitive with the private haulers doing that in the city today. We are affordable. Not that it's inexpensive, but it's better than what you probably can get in the private sector.
Well, and as I said in the intro, it's a conundrum. There really is no simple answer here for what solid waste disposal or addressing the long-term impacts of solid waste. One of the benefits of the bag and tag is that in some ways we incentivize reducing and refusing, and that's maybe not been the greatest impact, but it was there, and now it sort of has to go away because the comparable way to deal with it really creates this uneven scenario. Because I think I said this before, I put out 16 bags a year, 16 30-gallon bags a year. And that's because we try very hard not to put out waste. In this scenario, I'll put out my 64-gallon once a month, maybe. But there's no incentive to do that because I'm being charged quarterly as if it's out there every week.
I think one of the other points, and this is kind of like backing up a bit, is that we've proposed this to the council, and there aren't any other options.
Yeah.
The committee looked at, do we take it in-house? Does the town do that? And we found that it's cost prohibitive. We're not experts in that, but we don't want to get into that business. But that business is moving one way or another towards automation. And one of the big things is just safety of these employees, be they Waste Management or some other provider, to keep their business going.
I've got to think the automation is being driven by the safety, by the cleanliness aspect, also by the getting drivers.
Yeah, absolutely.
40 years ago, you had 3 men on a truck, right? The driver and one on each side grabbing and dumping. And if they have one now, well, they have to have at least one now. That's a good day. I know for a while when we internally looked at some of the operational benefits of bringing it in-house, one of the main cons was we struggled to get employees on our plow trucks and our typical truck drivers. We would then have to find more, and it's a real issue.
And the solid waste industry itself is having that problem.
Yeah.
They're paying truck drivers a lot of money, and if they get one, there's a high turnover rate, whether it's injury or they move on to something a little less glamorous than jumping out in high winds, cold weather, hot weather, and pitching trash and dumping recycling.
Yeah.
So
I've got to think too, one of the benefit of moving to the bigger toters is it'll remove some of the issues that you've probably tangentially heard about, but I know John Storer has told me that the plow operations here almost weekly during a snowstorm event is the smaller bins can easily get buried under snow, and then the sidewalk tractor comes along and it gets gummed up and same with the bags. The same thing can happen here. We would have to have some massive snowfall to cover one of these toters.
And along with the toters, that what we found some other communities are doing for senior citizens and disabled citizens, are offering a smaller toter. In their scenario, you petition the city that you need it and why you need it, and you get it. We view this as an accommodation, not a cost reduction. So what they have seen, the other communities, is some pretty low participation rate in that. And as another point, if you want to keep your private hauler, we'll offer you a recycling toter for your curbside collection at a cost.
So to that effect, is this going to be open to all residents, not just those on a public road?
Unfortunately, as part of some of the constraints and some of the viability and practicality of picking up toters, we've checked with other communities, and we think the viable options there are for single-family homes, 2-family units, and 3-family units only. We've opened it up to some private roads, the 26 grandfathered roads that were grandfathered many years ago for use. There's a list of them, and most of the private roads are not on them, so they'll be kind of on their own. Larger complex condominiums and apartment complexes, they'll be on your own. Other communities view them as businesses.
Yeah, I was going to say, in that standpoint, it probably makes more business sense for them to have dumpsters and a different type of hauling. Anyways.
So it's not like we want as many people to participate as possible. It was a little bit heart-wrenching to start denying people the service, but it's just the practicalities of it, and lining up more than 6 sets of toters on a curb. If you start getting up to 10, 12, 15 sets, it's unmanageable.
Yeah.
Is there any impact to the recycling center itself as part of the change?
The model that we're recommending is that we keep the recycling center in the general fund, in your property tax, for use with everyone. We did present a model where you could roll this recycling center into the utility fund, a user-based system that would complicate things a whole lot more and cost a lot more and be much more administratively burdensome. So we did not vie for that option. So it would be kept in the general fund, funded by property tax, available to all citizens as it is today.
So that'll still be an option if you've got those random pieces of cardboard and you don't want to wait until your recycling day. You can come down to the recycling center when it's open and put it in the cardboard bin, or for those that want to bring their bottles and cans.
Absolutely. And one thing that we've been recommending for many years is to get a third attendant there. Currently, we have 2 employees. We had a third attendant back in 2010. We were able to extend those hours to, I think, 5 or 6 days a week and make some of those hours after work hours, so people have more of an option to use the center. So we'll see how that transpires in this budget cycle. And if it doesn't, we'll probably remain at the 3 days per week, but still open and still a lot of opportunity to recycle on a bunch of various things.
Are there any other aspects of the step moving forward that the listeners should be aware of?
The thing that impresses me when I look at some of the numbers is that Dave's referred to. We've got a 2-year extension that's been offered, but it's interesting to see the numbers that reflect the efficiencies in the next 5 years, because the cost to the town, and that would translate down into individuals, actually steps down in those years. The other thing that in all the meetings that I've been to so far that really hasn't come to the top is that the cost for the toters is in this case, being carried by the provider. In this case, the only proposal that we have so far is from our current provider,
Sure.
Waste Management, and they're going to cover that cost. So if we were to flip that around and factor that in, our costs would go up significantly for that 5-year period. So
In that 2-year transition period, it gives people a time to use the bags they might have, and including our vendors who pre-buy bags. So it'll be able to phase out and give people enough time to think, okay, unlike me, no one else should be buying a year ahead. So we'll get through those. In the meantime, is there a process that community services will use to identify new homes that are built that come online? Because certainly the amount of homes that exist today that meet the single family, 2-family allowances, between now and 2 years from now, there's going to be a change. And maybe it's 10 units, maybe it's 20 units. It's not going to be 200 units probably, particularly because the private roads still have to address their own needs. But how are we accommodating for that, or knowing how many toters to actually obtain and assign?
So how this would work at startup and what Waste Management is proposing, they're planning for 7,800 stops at 2 toters per stop. So that's somewhere around 16,000 toters. They plan on working with our planning department to identify those units that are eligible for curbside collection and come up with a list and a tracking system of who's opting in and who wants toters and what variation of toters they want.
Sure.
Then that system will be set. They will deliver the toters probably 2 or 3 weeks before implementation. That's 2 years down the road. They're working with a third party to do that. And then from there, the city will take over and take that information, use that for the billing system as well. If they're just delinquent, they'll have to manage whether there's delinquent accounts, accounts current. And for those delinquent accounts, and they want to shut them off, they'll have to do what's called our red line, which is basically flag those delinquent accounts, get that information to the truck driver, so that truck driver does not pick up at that stop until that account is current. So that's how that's going to work. And as far as the future state and homes coming in and whatnot, yeah, that'll have to be worked out somewhat in the same manner. There'll have to be some administration by the city to track that sort of thing.
And I would think there's a process that we could implement, say 4 years from now, that as new homes come on, as part of your development process, you would say, okay, I need to buy a toter or toters for the new homes so that they can get into the system.
right.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Great. Dave, one last time, anything that might need to be added to the conversation here?
No, I don't think so. There's advantages and disadvantages to this program. A lot of people are going to like it. A lot of people are going to not like it, but that's just the nature of change. So we can make it work. This happened at roughly the same thing when we just went from free trash to bag and tag and recycling. We had all kind of it's a little bit of growing pains, but it's smoothed out. So it'll be better in the end.
Well, I appreciate you both coming in and having this conversation. And I agree with you, Dave. Someone's always going to have something to say about this. And hopefully once it gets into the change process, people can see the real benefits, particularly the safety and the aesthetic benefits, but also the automation, and having a more timely removal of the refuse is always a positive.
Well, I think one thing just to add to that is Dave has been working with the committee to focus them on the significant amount of education that's going to be required. Waste Management, in this case, the only people who have bid so far, have said, we will assist you in that process. But leading up to this process, there was a lot of education that was required here in the community anyways. So this effort is going to bring that to the forefront to get the word out to people who have a multifamily home and it's a business for them, and getting it out to all those people so that it's successful.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, that for a house that is not owner occupied, when the materials go to the owner, hopefully it trickles down to the actual tenant in the house.
Yeah. Well, and I
It'd
think
be like teaching your teenager.
Well, I think that the town needs to put that on the shoulders of the people who own that property. I live in an area that it's a combination of single family and multifamily homes, and you can tell the ones that do and the ones that don't. And so I think there's going to be a lot of upgrades to policies, and even one of the positions is for an enforcement person to be part of this, because it'll only be successful, truly successful, if you have a person like that.
Alrighty. Thank you both. Dover has a wealth of history in its over 400 years of existence. Coming up, Mike Gillis is going to share some of that history with us.
This week, in 1908, Foster's Daily Democrat reported on a solitary pine tree standing as the last sentinel of what was once a magnificent forest surrounding Dover's first high school. The newspaper noted that its companion tree had been recently felled, leaving this lone pine as the final witness to the area's rich history. The tree stood on the grounds where Dover's first high school was established in 1851 on Chestnut Street, north of the Cocheco River. At that time, the school was surrounded by a beautiful grove that made it one of the city's most pleasant residential sections. Among these trees stood a particularly remarkable oak in front of Mayor James Lothrop's home, which was documented to be over 250 years old based on its growth rings. The historic grove held special significance in Dover's history as the site of the sham battle, a term referring to the tragic event in 1676 when Major Richard Waldron staged a mock battle that led to the betrayal and capture of hundreds of Native Americans. This deception would later have devastating consequences for Dover, culminating in a massacre of retribution in 1689. By 1873 and 1874, the expansion of the railroad led to the clearing of most of the great grove behind the school. By 1904, the school itself would eventually be deemed, quote, poor in location and equipment, leading to the construction of a new high school on Locust Street, now the McConnell Center. Today, the area bears little resemblance to the wooded grove of the past, having been transformed by over a century of urban development. However, a small piece of this natural heritage endures along the Dover Community Trail, where a wooded section winds through part of what was once the Great Forest. The trailhead at the Dover Transportation Center parking lot sits near the same spot where the high school once stood.
Thanks for listening to the Dover Download this week. If you like what you heard, subscribe through your favorite podcast aggregator. And if you have something you want to hear a topic on, let us know. Finally, this is just one of the many ways we share information about the city of Dover. You can subscribe to the Dover Downloads email newsletter every week, or other newsletters that we have, by going to the City of Dover homepage, www.dover.nh.gov. Have a great week.